It is Sunday, September 1st, and this is Labor Day weekend. Now, one of the many reasons why I am proud to be a candidate with the Green Party and a member of the Green Party, lay aside the many benefits of that, and I've referred to the policy manual many times, the values in this document, which you can get freely on the website. But it is the fact, one of the reasons why I'm most proud is the fact that the Green Party has always defended workers' rights, advocated for workers' conditions, and been a voice for workers. And as somebody who started working at the age of 16 for Allied Moving Company and washed dishes and worked for a grocery company and retail at the Rideau Center in Ottawa, put myself through university, I know how important it is to be paid a wage that you can live on. And what we are seeing in these last couple of decades, actually, I have a graph coming up here, is showing the erosion of minimum wage. But the first thing I want to do before I launch into the next couple of days of how the Green Party is advocating for the worker is just ask you if you know what Labor Day is about and why we have Labor Day in Canada. Of course, May 1st is typically Labor Day throughout most of the world, but it is the first weekend of September here in Canada. It stems back from 1872, where the Toronto Typographical Union, the TTU, started advocating for what is known as the 9-hour movement. Now, the 9-hour movement, believe it or not, was because they thought, hey, you know what? Let's fight for a 9-hour workday. 9-hour workday, and they wanted Saturdays off to be with their families. How crazy was that? Because at that time, the TTU and essentially a working standard was 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. They said, let's start the 9-hour movement. Well, of course, the newspapers were opposed to their typographers wanting, shorter work days and a Saturday off. They had Sundays off, but it was 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, to the point that they hired people to come in when the typographers struck. And the typographers were seen as creating civil discord, and it was a criminal conspiracy. And to make a long story short, 24 instigators were arrested and imprisoned, and this led only to more worker outrage movement. There was a parade of 10,000 people in Toronto advocating and calling for the release of these prisoners, until later that same year, John A. Macdonald, the prime minister, kind of put his finger in the wind and said, with all of these unions banding together, and there were well over 20 unions banding together across Toronto and then across Canada, and made its way into Ottawa, this movement, he signed a labor bill that would bring into legislation the right to unionize and to protect workers. And that essentially is a very reductionist history of 1872, 5 years after Confederation, of how we got here today. Now, again, the Green Party recently as the last few years, 2020, has been advocating for workers' rights. And there are just three ways. There are three ways between today and tomorrow. My goodness, I'm already almost out of time. That the Green Party has been advocating for workers' rights. And the first of those is a minimum wage. The Green Party has, in 2020, and in the policy manual here, you will see under Section 7, again, you can get this on the Green Party website, there's a whole section on labor. And I encourage you to read this because the Green Party advocates for the worker. We are a country of workers, and the economy is driven, 65% of the economy's total health and well-being is driven by consumer spending, which means when workers are paid and they have buying power, that drives the economy. So we don't believe when large companies or corporations, or remember how the newspapers treated the people who were advocating for the 9-hour movement as criminal conspiracy or harmful to the economy or the development of the country. It is just not true. It hasn't been true. It wasn't true in 1872, and it's still not true now. In 2020, the Green Party, Megan Mitton, Kevin Arsenault, and David Kuhn, that caucus, put forward a bill, a motion that said we need to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour in New Brunswick. Then it was less than 12. It was among the lowest in the entire country. In the policy manual here, you will see how Greens wanted to raise the minimum wage by 2020. Well, that happened just earlier this year. The minimum wage was raised to $15.30 in this country to bring it up to still among the lower in the country when you look at all the provinces and territories. But the Greens wanted this back in 2020. This government, it took them 4 years to come around to do it. Now, there are other ways that Greens have been advocating for the worker, but I do want to show on this chart the eroding buying power of the minimum wage. This is American statistics. It's just the first thing I could grab. But you see on the right-hand side, the two lines represent the actual minimum wage going back to 1938 versus its adjusted for inflation. That's the black line. So where you see that big arch in the middle, that's the 70s, where back in 1938, the minimum wage was 25 cents, but adjusted for inflation, the black line, it was $5 and change. Okay, so that's still less than the American minimum wage where this was pulled, which was $7.25 an hour or so. But when you look at the 70s, even though numerically the blue line, the minimum wage is lower, if you adjust it for inflation, it was almost $14. So somebody in the 70s earning minimum wage would be earning the equivalent of $14+ today in US. We're in the US now, it's $7.25. So think about that. If you were making minimum wage in the 70s, you were essentially earning double what the minimum wage is now in terms of real buying power. That is an example, and Canada is not that far off, of how it is not livable. Tomorrow we'll talk more about the living wage and the two other ways that the Green Party has been fighting for workers. But again, you need to know that when you're thinking about workers' rights and money in your pocket and smart tax policy, the Green Party is your choice. And so again, that's why I'm proud to stand up with the Green Party and be running as a candidate. And that is why you need to vote for change this election. If you're a worker who believes that, again, all these measures for workers going back to 1872, this is for our common good. This is for the good of everybody. It makes everyone better and lifts us all out of poverty. Join me tomorrow for more about Labor Day as we talk about this on Labor Day weekend.